recording. Howdy, and welcome to our Sunday evening Bible hour. We'll be studying tonight in the book of Daniel, chapter 3. Not just directly through the book of Daniel, we are studying the characters as we did once in Revelation. We are studying the characters in the book of Daniel, and tonight we're studying the firemen. The firemen, as David Jeremiah calls them. Back during the times of old, in biblical times, a king or a leader, they enforced loyalty to them and them only, almost a worship type, that they were to be they were never to be crossed. Or even today we have some, like a good illustration would probably be Putin, who is the president or prime minister there of Russia. You either do what he says. I don't know if you've ever noticed, if you ever go in a room, he's nowhere close. All of his people are at the other end. He has one long table about 50 foot long. They're sitting at the other end, and he's way away from them. And of course, people like that, they don't trust their own people. And if you betray them at all, you're dead. Your family's dead. And that's kind of the way Nebuchadnezzar was. Now, I want you to back up just a minute as we get started in chapter 3. We're going to look at the whole chapter 3 tonight in the book of Daniel. Is anybody with us tonight? Somebody? What happened to Mom? I thought she was with us. She told me she'd be with us. If you look back and remember what happened in chapter 2, whenever nobody can interpret the dream for the king, when he had this weird dream, nobody could interpret it, and so he was going to kill everybody. He wanted them to tell him what he dreamed, and nobody could do it. Then Daniel did it, and when Daniel did it, then he changed his mind altogether. And this is what he said. This is kind of strange. Listen to this. Verse 46, we're looking in chapter 2. Then the king Nebuchadnezzar fell on his face and worshipped Daniel. This is a ruthless dictator king. It'd be almost like Putin or somebody doing that. It's unbelievable. So he worshipped Daniel and commanded that they should offer an oblation and sweet odors unto him like he was some god. And Daniel told him right away he wasn't. But he said, then the king answered, and Daniel said, oh, of a truth it is that your God is a God of gods and Lord of kings and a revealer of secrets, seeing that thou couldst reveal this secret. So he's practically worshiping. Oh man, it almost looks like, and we're going to see in our chapter tonight, and even the one next week or the week after, we're going to see that it seems like at the end of every chapter he's repenting. It doesn't last very long. This one actually lasted 20 years. Then the king made Daniel a great man and gave him many great gifts and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon, the chief of the governors over all the wise men of Babylon. He was actually second in command to Nebuchadnezzar. And then Daniel asked about his friends Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego if they could work with him and kind of be his subordinates. And Daniel was set at the gate of the king, which means he was everybody knew he was a big cheese, second in command. Now, look at the first verse in chapter 3. Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold whose head was 60 cubits, and the breadth thereof 6 cubits, and he set it upon the plain of Dura, in the province of Babylon. So he's changed his mind already. Now we got to remember, between verse 49 of chapter 1 and the first verse of chapter 3, there's 20 years. It doesn't tell you, but there's 20 years in chronologically. We like to study chronologically. And so there's 20 years in between. So he's now changed his mind. And for some reason in his mind, he decides that he's going to set up this statue. Now this thing was way out of proportion. It wasn't a statue, actually the size statue. This thing was 10 stories high. If you can imagine how 10 stories high is. I don't think we got anything in Leap, but we may do now, but I don't know, it's not very popular. 10 stories, pretty high. So, but it was just straight up. It was narrow, and it was straight up, and it was a man, but it was like a real tall, skinny man. And it was solid gold with the head of gold. The whole statue was gold. And for some reason, and in this chapter he talks about worshiping, mentions worship 11 times. Now, there's several reasons why he may have done this. One was that Babylon represented, if you remember, the head of gold. Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom represented the head of gold. But he didn't make just a statue with a head of gold. He made the whole statue gold. The whole statue was gold. And it could have been because it was supposed to be replaced by the Medo-Persian Empire. That was the next empire that was going to take over. And maybe he thought if he made the whole statue of gold, somehow he was going to outwit these, this dream, outdo it, because he was going to make everything different. Or Babylonian grew to be the greatest city in the world, and there was many religious views in that area, and he wanted to get everybody to focalize on him or on Babylon. And of course, there was no doubt that this statue was supposed to be him. I don't know if it looked like him, but so he was wanting to get him to, or them, all the people and all the people around the area to worship this statue, which was him, like he's deity. Deity means God. When we talk about Jesus, the deity of Christ, we mean that Jesus is God. So there was another guy, Nimrod. He tried the same thing, making himself God. People worshiping him like God. Some of the old Egyptian pharaohs were to be worshipped like God. If you didn't have a choice back then, it wasn't like today. You have a choice if you want to be a Jehovah's Witness or Mormon or whatever. You didn't have a choice. You were what they told you were. And you did it whether you liked it or not. And so this is kind of what he was doing. And also there were, the third reason is that they were counselors. Well, actually, let me back up just a minute. Nimrod and Nebuchadnezzar, who he was trying to be deity, were both types. You know what a type is? It doesn't mean, it means similarities. It has similarities, types. In the Old Testament, Joseph was a type of Jesus. There's no recorded sin of Joseph, and he was lied to, mistreated, beaten, and everything. And so he's a type of Jesus. And so these Nimrod and Nebuchadnezzar were both types of the coming beast that's foretold in the book of Revelation during the tribulation period, who is to be the one world leader to be worshipped of everybody. So they're kind of like types. And then also another reason that he might have done this was that they were a group of counselors of the king that did not like Daniel and his friends. They could have been some of those guys that came with them out of Egypt. It could have been some of their own people that was betraying them. They just wanted to have try to leave as much normal life as they could without, we call it stirring the waters, like what Daniel did when he said, we're not going to eat this. So they could have been jealous and devised a plot to where they could have, we don't know if they did, but they could have incited this into the king's mind. You know, you're the only one that should be worshipped, because they knew that Daniel and his friends would not worship this image. Now, in our story, and the story that you've probably heard many times, Daniel's not around for some reason. He's probably in another country on an errand or something, but he's not in town at the time, as far as we know. Because if he was, he sure wouldn't have bowed down to this statue. So Daniel's probably on an errand, seeing another king in another town or something, and this happened. So these guys may have instigated the king, Nebuchadnezzar, to say, you're the only one that should be worshipped. You know how you can do people. You're the only one that's worthy to be worshipped. So why don't you build an image of yourself and have everybody worship it? And so when he did, he made it a pure gold. Like I said, it was unequally proportioned. It was just so tall and slender, 10 stories high, 90 some feet high, and with a head of gold. So it was just straight down. Anyway, what happened was, he sends out an invitation. Now, I want you to notice this list that he sends out this invitation to, because when I sent out an invitation and I said, okay, we're going to have a barbecue, we're going to have what we've never had here. We were going to have it, what would we call it, office party, huh?
It's like a housewarming.
Housewarming, yeah. And you bring gifts to me. No. A housewarming, maybe dedication. I don't like that. It's too Catholic, I think. I don't know. We could do it. We dedicate this building for the service of the Lord, these rooms that we built. We thought about doing that. And then so I would send out and I'd say, hey, if you want to come, let me know. And maybe we'd invite some friends. Let me know if you're coming. If you do that formally, it's called RSVP. Now, I'm not sure what that stands for. Granny said, and Clampett said it stands for roast skunk very possible, but I don't know what it actually stands for, but it means you need to respond right away, right? As soon as you can, respond if you're coming or not, because it's formal. Please respond. Maybe it's to a wedding, maybe if you get invited to a wedding, and it'll say at the bottom of the little invitation, RSVP. That means you need to respond if you're coming, because they want to know how many meals to buy, how many plates, and how many gifts, how many little things they set at the table that you can take home with you. That's why they need to know that. So they want you to respond. Now, when Nebuchadnezzar sends this out, there was no RSVP. It was when you got this invitation, you were coming. So look at the list. Look at the two lists. Here's the list of invitation. Here's the list of the people who came. Verse 2. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king sit to gather together. I did read verse 1, didn't I? Did I read verse 1? Okay. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king sent to gather together the princes, the governors, and the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the province. Did you get that list? You got that list? Mm-hmm. The princes, the governors, the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the province, to come into the dedication of the image which Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Then this is who came. The princes, the governors, the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the province were gathered together unto the dedication of the image of Nebuchadnezzar. So everybody came. When they got invited, they came. There wasn't, I've got a cold, I can't come, I'm coughing, I'm sneezing, I got a TV program, I gotta watch something. You are coming. If you're invited, you're gonna be there, because the king said it was. So the king had set up, and they stood before the image of that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So here they are, before this image. And so they're standing looking at this goofy looking, it had to be pretty goofy looking to be the shape it was in. It wasn't, like I said, it wasn't the shape like it was a nice statue of a man in proportion. It was way out of proportion. And it was just probably straight up. And then it had a head on top of it. You know, it may have arms, but it was like a tall, skinny statue. Real skinny. You're talking about 10 stories high. Pretty high. And then this head on top of it. So they're standing there looking at this goofy thing. And then, this is what Nebuchadnezzar said. Then an herald, so here's a man who is a herald, somebody who's got a big, deep voice, because they didn't have a PA system and loudspeaker. And so they got this guy to sound it out. And here's what he said. To you it is commanded, O people, nations, and languages, that at what time you hear the sound of the cornet, the flute, harp, the sackbut, the psaltery, dulcimer, and all kinds of music, you fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king has set up. So it's pretty clear what he told them to do. This is a command. That whenever, anytime they hear this music, they fall down and worship the statue. Now this is a little bit different. Like in the States when they play the national anthem, or here you stand up, put your hand over your heart, but here you're supposed to bow down, put your face to the ground, and worship this goofy looking image. And verse 6, this guy's still talking. Whoso falleth not down and worshipeth the same hour, be cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, at that time, when all the people heard, now that was his plea. So that was the demand. You will bow down when you hear this sound. So, verse 7, and therefore at that time, when all the people heard the sound of the cornet, the flute, the harp, the sackbut, the psaltery, and all kinds of music, all the people, the nations, and the languages, there was people from all over came there, fell down. That somebody once heard somebody say there were probably in the neighborhood of, well, neighborhood means roughly 300,000 people there. That's a lot of people. It says, and they fell down, all these people fell down and worshiped the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So everybody fell down. Wherefore, now here's the problem that you get a problem. These Chaldeans, and I believe it was some of these guys who was unhappy with Daniel. They were jealous because Daniel was the only one, and he's the one that actually saved their lives, if you notice it. But I think it was some of these jealous people who these Chaldeans are. Wherefore, at that time, verse 8, certain Chaldeans came near and accused the Jews, and they spake and said to the king Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. Thou, O king, hast made a decree that every man shall hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, dulcimer, and all kinds of music, shall fall down and worship the golden image. And I'm sure he said, yes, that's right. And whosoever falleth not down and worship him. Now they're reminding him what his law was. that he should be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. So they're coming and saying, oh boy, we're going to rat on these guys, because I don't know if he noticed it, I don't know if the king noticed it, but if you got 300,000 people and the king's sitting here and the statue's over there, and 300,000 people is in front of you and they all bow down, I'm sure you're going to be able to see three guys that didn't bow down. But they wanted to bring it to his attention. And then you say in whosoever, verse 11, that falleth not down and worshipeth, that he should be cast in the midst of the fiery furnace. Well, there were certain Jews whom thou hast set over the affairs of the province. I don't know if you remember. You remember 20 years ago, remember that last verse we read where Daniel said, how about my friends? And he put them in charge of everything. Well, he knew these guys. Nebuchadnezzar knew these boys. They're men now. This is 20 years later, so now they're probably in their late 30s or 40s. Probably late 30s. I would say they're 35 or so. So they're men now. There are certain Jews of whom thou hast set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, and they're going to name them Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. That's the name that Nebuchadnezzar gave them. These men, O king, have not, now he's going to tell them three things they didn't do. First, they have not regarded you. Second, they've served not thy gods. They didn't serve you, they didn't serve your gods, nor did they worship the golden image which you set up. So there's three things that they did, and we're telling you right now, you need to know this. Ha ha ha. I'm sure they thought under their breath. Well, this kind of didn't sit well with Nebuchadnezzar. Old Neb was mad because these boys did not bow down to him. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in his rage and fury, commanded to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. That they brought, then they brought these men before the king. So now they marched the guys up. They're in front of the king, and normally, what would happen was he would immediately, you disobeyed me, you're going to the furnace. But you got to remember, he put these guys in high position because of Daniel, who was probably out of town. So he's thinking something that nobody like him would ever do would be to give him a second chance. Maybe he misunderstood. He wouldn't have never done that. He would have never done that. A leader like Nebuchadnezzar, he would have never said, maybe you didn't get it. Would you mind? Let me tell you, I'll give you a second chance. He gives these guys a second chance. He said, Nebuchadnezzar spake, verse 14, and he said to them, is it true? Is it true? Oh, and he puts an O there, which means it shows respect. It's almost like saying Poe. You know, he shows them respect. Oh, Shadrach. Oh, my heart's breaking for you. Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. Did not ye serve my gods, nor worship the golden image which I have set up? Come on, guys. Maybe something happened, you were not listening, you didn't get the memo. Now, if you be ready, that at what time, now get ready, okay, we're going to try this again. You didn't get it first time, this band played. Now, this band was loud, it had a big, all these instruments were playing. Maybe you didn't hear it. So we're going to start the band again. I'm going to get my band leader to kick off the band again and start that music one more time. I'm going to do it again, so you'll be able to bow down to it. Now, verse 15. If you be ready, that at what time you hear the sound, and he's going to go through all these instruments again, the cornet, the flute, the harp, the sackbut, the psaltery, the dulcimer, all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the image which I have made. Well, you're well if you do it, okay? It's well. Everything's going to be okay if you do it. We're going to start the band again, then you're to bow. But if you worship not, you shall be cast. Now they already knew the outcome, what he said before. He didn't have to tell them twice. They knew what was going on. You shall be cast that same hour into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. And who is that God who shall deliver you out of my hands? Now, he didn't think back 20 years ago, the God that interpreted that dream and told him everything that was going to happen in the future. Maybe, 20 years happened, nothing's happened, I'm still in charge here. But it didn't last long. So, Shadrach, verse 16. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king. Now, the King James here makes it a little hard to understand what they were saying. They said, we don't even need to answer what you said. We don't have to give you an answer. There's no need to answer your question. I mean, our minds were made up a long time before you built that statue. We're not worshiping any other God. King James says, Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. What they were saying to us, we don't even have to think about it. This is not something you have to ask us again and again to do. We don't have to think about it. Now, this is what I'd like to share with you. You need to make your mind up now. What would happen if you were ever to be challenged about your faith? You probably won't ever have to be, but what if you have ever thought about it? What if I was challenged about my faith? You need to make up your decision a long time and not wait till then. Let's see, what should I do? I could go in that fiery furnace over there and die, but I'd have to denounce Jesus, which I kind of liked him. We've been worshiping, having a good time. You need to make up your mind ahead of time. What would I do? And I've thought about this a bazillion times. Bazillion is a lot of times. What would I do if somebody ever walked up and said, are you the pastor of this church because this is illegal and we're going to arrest you, we're going to do this or that? I don't believe I'd hesitate. There wouldn't be any question about it. And I hope you've got your mind made up. They have. So that's what they're saying. They said, we don't have to think about that. We don't have to think about it. You're asking us to do it. We didn't do it the first time. You play the band again, strike up the band. We're not going to do this. So they said, if it be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace. You see, here's what we're doing, Deb. We're not going to bow down to this goofy looking thing here, nor worship to you. You're not God. You're not deity. Our God is the only true and living God. And we're not bowing down. And we believe our God is going to deliver us. But if he doesn't, we're still not going to bow down. Now, here's what they were saying. And I want you to think about this. Faith, if I can put it up on the whiteboard. We got a marker in here? Good. Yeah. I've told you this before. I don't know if you could focus on here. Faith is believing now wait no just before you start thinking, and if you haven't seen me do this before, just wait a minute. Yet doubting but acting on your belief. Is that right? Faith is believing yet doubting but acting. I think that's right. I've written it down so long. Here's what I mean by that. Do they see it? Can you see it? Okay, you come back over to me. All right, here's what I'm talking about. Faith is believing without seeing. I've never seen Jesus. Anybody here seen Jesus? Ever seen Jesus? You can't see God, you can't see the Holy Spirit, so how do you know He's real? Because of our faith, because of the Word of God. We believe it's the truth. We have faith to believe that. But we live in this flesh house. Are you with me? We live in this flesh house. And we believe in our faith, the faith that we have. We're not saved by works. The Bible says in Ephesians 2:8, for grace are you saved through faith, and that not of works. It is a gift of God. It is a gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. Verse 10 says, for we are His workmanship, created in Christ Jesus unto good works. So here's the thing about it. Faith is believing, but although your flesh says, I don't know, that's the little nervous part you get. But you act on what you believe. You act on what you believe. Does that make sense? Do y'all understand that? Let me try to put it simpler. Let's see. Hold on a minute. Let me look at something. Don't go nowhere. James chapter 1, verse 22 says, be ye doers of the word, and not hearers only. So actually, what I'm trying to say, and I want you to listen very carefully, this may be the most important message you'll ever hear. Because this is this story is the most powerful miracle in the Bible. What happened to these guys? More than Jonah and all these other. This is a do book. Now, we're not saved by doing anything, but our salvation causes us to do. Our faith is an action word. Okay, if you're in James, turn just back a couple of pages to Hebrews chapter 11. This is called the hall. A lot of pastors have dubbed this the hall of faith, not the hall of fame. You have a lot of places where this is the baseball hall of fame, or the sports hall of fame, or the football hall of fame, or whatever. This is the hall of faith. These were patriarchs who, because of their faith, listen carefully, because of their faith, they did something. Are you with me? Let's just look at a couple. One of the first ones, the first two children in the Bible, first two people who were born, Cain and Abel. There's one of them right here, verse 4. By faith, Abel offered unto God a more excellent sacrifice. He didn't do that by works. Now, a lot of people, even some pastors, I've heard them preach this. Well, Cain offered what God wanted, and he was saved because of what he did. No, he wasn't. He was saved because of his faith. That verse teaches you that right there. He was saved because of his faith, but it was his faith that produced him to do that. When the children of Israel were in Egypt, in Egyptian bondage, remember? And then God sent Moses to get them out, to lead them out, not to get them out, but to deliver them out. And he sent the plagues, the last plague, y'all taught it very well. What was the last plague?
The death of the firstborn.
The kill the firstborn. What did they have to do, Madeline? Not, if they're firstborn, not to die. What did God tell them to do?
To kill that animal.
to kill an animal, a lamb, a yearling, a perfect lamb, and what were they to do with it, Rose? What were they to do with the blood of the lamb?
You put it on the doorpost.
Put it on the doorpost over the top, it's almost like a cross, the top, and then the sides of the doorpost. Now, it wasn't that blood, he said, when I'm gonna send the death angel, and when I see the blood, I will pass over you. But it wasn't the blood that saved them, it was their faith that put the blood there. They trusted Christ. Remember when they were whining out after they got out in the desert, and they complained because to God, they murmured and complained, God sent snakes to bite them. Remember, that's one of your favorite stories with the little snake on the pole. Remember that story? Okay, if they looked to that snake by faith, because Jesus told them, or God told them, I want you to do this. Tell the children of Israel, if they look to this snake, make a bronze brass serpent, put it up on a pole and hold it up, and when they look to that, they'll live. There's a song, look and live, my brother, live, look to Jesus. Anyway, sorry, I get all these songs in my head. They were to look, but what would cause them to look? Why would cause, they get bit by a snake? Why do they want to look at another snake? Because God told them to. And their faith caused them to look, so they look by faith. That's how they were saved, the only way they're saved. How is anybody saved today? By looking at Jesus on the cross. Are you with me now? All right, so what I'm saying is, now think about this again. I know when I wrote it, you didn't like it, but think about it again. Faith is believing, yet your flesh is going, I don't know if I believe that or not, I don't get it. But you act on what you believe. There are times when I got on the airplane to come to the Philippines to bring my family to live here forever, a lot of people told me I was crazy. My dad even told me you shouldn't take my kids, grandkids over there and all this stuff in that situation and whatever. And on the airplane I was going, wow, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing, I knew God, pretty sure God wanted me to come over here, but my flesh was going, are you an idiot? Are you doing this? How are you going to live over? What are you going to do? You don't know these people. You don't speak the language. It's not going to work. You're just wasting your time. You left everything behind. You left your family and everything. And then your flesh goes. But you act upon what you believe. That's your faith. Faith is an action word. This is a new book. Joshua 1:8 tells us that. 8 or 9, 8, yeah. Joshua chapter 1, and verse 8 says, this book of the law, talking about the law, all they had was the law of Moses there. We're just in Joshua, so, all they had was the first 5 books which Moses wrote. He's dead now. Joshua was their leader. This book of the law shall not depart out of thy mouth, but thou shalt meditate therein day and night, that thou mayest observe to, what's that word, class? Do according to all that is written therein. For then thou shalt make thy way prosperous, and then when? Then when you do it, you will have good success. So this is a do book. We are supposed to do it. But why do we do it? We do it by faith. Now, here we have the children. Well, let's look at somebody else. Let's look at Esther. Where is she at? Esther. Where is it? Judges. Esther, Job, Psalm. Esther, Job, Psalm. 5:4. Job. Nehemiah, Esther. Chapter 4. Okay, so you know the story pretty much. If you don't, I'll just give you a quick review. Esther now is Vashti, the former queen, didn't please the king, so he kicked her out. I don't know why he didn't kill her, usually he would, but he got rid of her, and then he desired to have this Jewish girl. He didn't know she was Jewish. She was one of his, in his kingdom, one of his girls, and she must have been pretty beautiful. He chose her to be his wife, so she became his wife. And then this wicked man that was kind of second in command or so, he went to the king and said, you know, we need to get rid of these Jews. They're a problem, and they're going to cause you a problem, and you need to sign this paper. So he tricked him into signing this paper to kill all the Jews. Well, when Mordecai found out about it, who was the uncle of Esther, he sent a message, and he said, we're in big trouble, and you're in big trouble. You are a Jew, and the king has just signed an edict and put his signet on it that he's gonna kill all the Jews. And he goes, wow. And he tells her, you need to pray. You need to go in and see the king. You need to go on their behalf and talk him in to not doing this horrible thing. So she says, you know, if I go in to see him and he doesn't summon me, I can't just walk into his chambers. I can't do that. If he doesn't call me and I just walk in, he could have me killed. He could have me beheaded if my entrance to him don't please him. If he's in a bad mood, he'll have me killed. So here's what she says. And this I like. This is a good thing to underline in verse 14, the last verse. He says, but thy father's house shall be destroyed, but who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this? God had her at the right place, the right time. He says, who really knows if you're not there for this right at this certain time, you happen to be in the right place, but you've got to go see the king. So this is what she says. Then Esther bade them return Mordecai this answer. She's sending her uncle this letter. Go and gather all together all the Jews. Now she's a Jew, remember, that are present in Shushan, and fast ye for me, neither eat nor drink 3 days and night, night or day. I also and my maids will fast likewise, so will I go in to the king, which is not according to law. She says, I'm going to go. I am going to go. You pray for me. We're going to pray. We're going to fast. I'm going to go. And then she says this. So that's her fate. Her fate's taking her in there. Are you with me? But do you think she had that little doubt? Look what she says. If I perish, I perish. He might kill me, but my fate's going to take me in there. The faith is the action word that moved her feet to go in to see the king. Are you with me? Faith is an action word. It causes us to do something. Are you got it? And of course, she went in and everything, and if you don't have to read the story, it's really a cool story. It could make a great movie. They probably have it somewhere. But just itself, how she turned everything around, or God turned everything around for her, and the wicked guy was hung on his own gallows and everything, Haman. So here we have a lady that's saying, I'm going to do it, but if I perish, I perish. But my fate's going to take my feet into his presence. If he decides to kill me, it's okay, but I'm going in. You pray for me. So this is our fate. They were all praying. They were all fasting for 3 days. She and her maidens were fasting. I don't know how many she had. But she was going to go in, so that was her faith in action. But she did have a little bit of doubt there. She said, I could die. He could kill me. He could kill me. But I'm going in. My fate's going to take me in. I was thinking of another time. Do you remember the time over in Acts chapter somewhere 5 or 6? Let's see where it's at. Somewhere around there, I'm just guessing. I'll find it when I get there. whenever, let's see. Where was it at? Oh, it was for. That's been heavily after Stephen's done. What I'm looking for, somebody wants to help me. Here it is. Here it is, it's in chapter 12, Acts 12. This is where Peter was put in prison and the church is praying for him. Remember, they have a prayer meeting and then angel carries him out, goes and gets him, brings him out. And then they're at this prayer meeting, they're praying for Peter to be released from the prison. That's their prayers. He shows up at the door. The girl who's making the coffee and donuts, Rhoda, she runs to the door. She hears Peter knocking. She goes to the door, and when she sees who it is, she gets so excited she don't unlock the door, like the gate. I guess it would be like our gate out here. She doesn't unlock the gate. When she sees who it is, she runs back and says, Peter's at the gate. And they said, what are you talking about? That's why we're having this meeting. Go back and fix the coffee and the donuts, man. We're almost through. She said, Peter's standing at the gate. They said, it can't be. It must be his ghost. It can't be him. He's in prison. That is why we're praying for him right now. So they were praying by faith, but they had this, because of their flesh. We live in this flesh. You understand? This flesh wants to not believe God. That's the whole thing about the flesh. That's why a lot of people don't believe. But our faith causes us to do the action. They were down praying for Peter to get out of jail, but they didn't really think that God was going to send an angel and bring him out. But he did. Brought him out to their door. So they finally, she convinced them to go to the gate, and there's Peter standing there, and they couldn't believe it. And even in our story right here, these guys said, God, we're not going to bow to your statue, Neb. We're not bowing to your statue. You can do whatever you want. That's their faith. Throw us in that fire, it's okay. Our God will save us. That's their faith. God's going to save us. But if he don't, it's okay. We're just going to be with him. Or you got it? So you'll have this. If you ever think, am I the only one that has this problem? Am I the only one that wrestles with this? My faith seems to be pretty puny because every time I want to do something, I feel like I don't have the strength to do it. This is probably the best definition. And when I first mention this, some people get mad and some pastors don't understand it, but this is as clear. This helped me more than anything when I first heard it and came across it. And then I started studying this, and it's so true that because we live in this flesh house, we're going to fight with this flesh to our dying day. We have this old nature, this Adamic nature that don't trust God. Eve didn't trust him, but she turned on God. So did Adam. And now we're born into a family. When we're physically born, we're born with this mistrust to God. So when we have faith, the way it shows itself is in action by what you do. Be very careful. You're not saved because you do anything, but because of the faith that you believe, you act upon it. And so these guys said, we believe God's going to save us. But if he chooses not to, it's okay. It's okay. We are going to stand for God and for our God, not you. We're not bound down to that thing, that goofy looking thing. We are going to stand for God, and He is going to deliver us, O King. But if He don't, we're still good with it. See what I'm saying? Okay, but if not, be it known, O King, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. Now this really infuriated old Neb. He got so mad, and here's the problem. When you make, and I always try to tell you this, all of you, and sometimes I have to remember this when it happens to me, don't make a major decision when you're upset, because you'll make a foolish decision. Wait, or when you're angry or when you're mad, let it cool off and then make a choice. That's very good advice. Now here's what happened to him. He gets so mad, so infuriated, he's gonna, well, I'm gonna do something. You're not gonna do that to me. So here's what he does. He has them heat up the furnace 7 times hotter than it normally was. Now if he would have thought this thing through, if he wanted to make it worse for them, he would have cooled it down and cooked them slowly. But that wasn't his plan. He was so mad, I mean, even, and you're going to see that the guys who threw him in burned alive. They were so hot. Then was Nebuchadnezzar full of fury, verse 19, and the form of his visage was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Now he's really mad about these guys for what they told him. You're not going to do it. I'll give you a second chance. And now you've embarrassed me in front of the whole kingdom. Therefore he spake and commanded that they should heat the furnace 7 times more than it was wont to be heated. Wow, he's got it really fired up there. Not a good idea. And he commanded the most mighty men that were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, to cast them into the burning furnace. Now, he did it so rushingly, he didn't even have them stripped down. Usually they'll strip them down naked, but he left them with all their clothes and their hats and everything on. Then these men were bound in their coats, their hosen, their hats, and their outer garments, and were cast into the midst of the fiery furnace. I mean, he didn't cast them in like they would normally do, which is just naked, like they crucified them and everything. Therefore, because the king's commandment was urgent, and because of his heat of anger, remember, his anger, the furnace was exceedingly hot. The flame and fire slew those men which took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So now all of these 6 men who grabbed these guys and to throw them in there, they were all burned alive. They were the king's best men. He just killed 6 of his own men. Good men. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, verse 23, fell down bound in the midst of the burning. They fell probably, if you get this in mind, it was probably like this. If I could draw you a picture of it. It was probably a walkway here. Well, their hands were bound. I don't know how to bind their hands in a drawing like this. And the furnace was probably had the top open like this, and down at the bottom, the fire was down here, and they were thrown in to this furnace, something like that. They were thrown down into that thing. This was open, so when they fell down in there, you could see them, you could watch them burn up. That's basically how it was set up. Okay, so now they are in the furnace, and where was that at? Verse 24. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astonished, actually it should be in today's term, and rose up in haste and spake and said to his counselors, Did not we cast 3 men bound into the midst of the furnace. Now, by the way, the only thing that they had from Babylon was the ropes that was on their hands, which immediately burned up. And they answered and said to the king, he said, did not we cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? And they answered and said, true, O king. And he answered and said, lo, whoa, wait a minute, man. I see 4 men loose. So their ropes burnt off. Nothing else did, just the ropes. And they have no hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. Actually, it was the Son of God. It was Jesus. It's called, and I've mentioned it several times, an appearance of Jesus in the Old Testament was called a Christophany. Christophany or theophany, it's, some scholars use different terms, but it means the same thing. An Old Testament appearance of Jesus in bodily form, when he came to Abraham and talked to him about him and Sarah having a baby, and then the 2 others went to Sodom and Gomorrah to destroy it, and then Abraham bargained with Jesus there, and then remember when Jacob wrestled with the angel, that was Jesus. Okay, that's called a Christophany. Then, verse 26, Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mouth of the burning, so he walks up and looks. Now, I don't know how close he's planning on getting, if you realize it was 7 times hotter and his own men got burned up. So he comes to the mouth of the burning fiery furnace. And like I said, if you want to get the picture in your mind, which I always do when I'm reading, it's basically kind of like that. They threw him down into the mouth of it, but at the bottom you could see the fire was open. And Nebuchadnezzar came to the mouth of the burning fiery furnace, so he's going to talk to him. And he spake and he said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, ye servants of the... Now his tone has changed considerably. From getting so passionate and hot and in the heat of passion and wanting to burn them alive real quick, he completely changes his whole demeanor again. And he says, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, ye servants of the Most High, come forth and come hither. Come on, out of there. Get out of that fire. I can't wait to meet that 4th guy. Well, the 4th guy never comes out. The 3 do. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth out of the midst of the fire. And the princes, the governors, the captains, the kings, and the counselors, being gathered together, saw these men whose bodies the fire had no power, nor was there a hair. You ever get your hair burnt, and it's, the smell, that smell of hair, it's got a very unique smell. No, they didn't have, their hair was not singed. They call it singeing. If you get your hair burnt, it's called singeing. Their hair on their head was singed, nor was the hair on their head singed. Neither were their coats charged or changed, nor the smell of fire had passed upon them. They didn't even have the smell of smoke on their, when you get around somebody, this happens a lot. If you ever get in a car with somebody who's smoking, you get out and you can walk around people. If you walk in and sit down, I go, man, have you been smoking? You say, no, I was in a car and somebody in the car was smoking, or in a jeepney or whatever, So it stays with you. It stays on your clothes. But he said, there's nothing that, they don't even smell of smoke. It's unbelievable. Then Nebuchadnezzar spake and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who have sent his angel and delivered his servants that trusted in him, and have changed the king's word and yielded their bodies, that they might not serve nor worship any god except their own God. So now here he is again. Worshiping the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He's changed his mind again. Therefore, now here he goes. Therefore, I made a decree that every people, nation, and language which speak anything amidst against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut to pieces, and their houses shall be made a dunghill, because there's no other God that can deliver after this sort. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. So he's repented again he repented. I told you, we read the last few verses of verse number 2. Whenever Daniel told him the dream and what it meant and everything, he repented and said, "Oh, your God's the greatest." Now he's doing it again, and he'll do it again. He'll do it again after he changes his mind. He goes back, he's going to do it again. So we'll look at that. I'll tell you what we'll do. Next week we're going to review it, and then we're going to watch this video. This guy that I showed you that we really like tell this story. And he's going to tell this story. Now, the thing that you should take home, what do we take away from this? As I said, you need to know ahead of time. Don't wait till it happens and say, what should I do? Best thing to do is say, Lord, I want you to help me if something ever happens. Or if my friends, I'm with a group of friends and they want to go drinking or want to go dancing, want to do this, and will I deny you and say, I'm sorry, I don't do that because I'm a Christian and I take a stand. Are you willing to take a stand? You need to make that decision before the time comes. Or if somebody ever asks you, about your faith or asks you to deny God as your Savior or Jesus Christ, would you do it? Would you do it? You need to decide that ahead of time. And don't wait till then thinking, what's the cost? Oh, they're going to hurt me. I'll deny him. You need to learn to have faith. Don't forget this little thing here. I know it seems silly and it doesn't seem right, but this has helped me many times because faith is an action word. It causes you to produce, although, and we saw all the illustrations, there's more than that. People in the Bible, they had faith, but they doubted. All of them did. Moses did. Remember Moses, what happened to him? He struck the rock. He just didn't believe because of his flesh. We all have this flesh to live in. And it's not fun because it wants to raise its ugly head. And when we say flesh, we're not talking about just the skin. We're talking about our old nature, who we were before we were saved. And it probably wasn't a pretty picture, who you were, how you thought, what you did. And now that you are saved, we live by faith. Faith, always think of this little, whatever it is, what do you call it? Equation. Faith is believing, yet there's that hint of doubt that you act upon your belief. I'm going to do what I feel like God's told me to do. Yeah, but that's silly. You wouldn't do that. You wouldn't leave your job. You wouldn't go move to Vietnam or Burma to be a missionary. You wouldn't do that, would you? This is what God's told me to do. And I am acting upon what God has called me to do. That's faith. And you don't have to tell anybody, but everybody else has the same problem too. And you're thinking, and something in your being, your physical being is going, I don't know if I'd do that. I really feel like, and that's what happened to these guys. It happened to people praying for Peter. It happened to, what's her name, Esther. It happened to these guys here. And it happened to several others. Even one of the greatest prophets in the Bible, Elijah, had problems. We got to learn to trust God by faith. And by doing that, we act on our faith. Remember, I didn't read but one of these, but let's end with this right here. Let's go back to Hebrews 11, please. And we'll end with this. Okay, all I read was one. By faith, Abel offered. He did something. You got it? Abel offered. He made that offering by faith, not by obedience. People says he was saved because he obeyed God. How did he obey God? God didn't tell him to do that. How did he? Have you ever thought? How did Abel ever think to do that? Why would Abel? What would be in his mind? The Bible says no good thing can come from man. What would be in Abel's mind and heart that he thought God would like a bloody little lamb all chopped up on an altar burning, which had to smell. When you cut and slaughter an animal, it stinks. The blood stinks. It smells horrible. To God, it's sweet savor. But in our own thinking, look at all these beautiful, the papaya, the pakwan, the mangoes, the fruits and the vegetables, the tomatoes, the cucumbers, all of these things that Cain offered from his garden. And God said, that's not what I want. That doesn't please me. How in the world did Abel ever come up with this idea? I'll tell you where he came up with it. He learned it from his mom and dad, who learned it from God. Because you remember what God did when they sinned? He slaughtered 2 animals. I believe he killed those animals in the way that their blood would flow out. So they realized without the shedding of blood, there's no forgiveness for sin. They told it to their sons. The other one said, there ain't no way I'm going to believe that. Listen, I'm not killing an animal. That's horrible. He winds up killing his brother. But he said, no, I'm not killing an animal. I'm going to offer God this. And then God got upset with him. And then it caused him to be mad at God. And so he goes out and kills his brother. So Abel offered. How did he offer? By faith. I didn't write this. By faith, Abel offered, verse 4. By faith, verse 5, Enoch was translated. By faith, verse 7, by faith, Noah, being warned of God in a dream, moved with fear and prepared an ark. So Noah built the ark by faith. That was what was the building? That was produced his work. That was a part of work, him building that ark. That was his faith in action. Faith is an action word. 8, verse 8, by faith Abraham, when he was called to go into a place which should not receive for an inheritance, he went out. That was his faith. He went out. By faith he sojourned. And it goes all the way down. If you turn to page or two and get to 17, by faith, verse 17, by faith Abraham, when he was tried, offered up Isaac. He did that by faith. That was an action. It's what he did. Now, he might have doubted, I don't know, but he did not know what God was going to do. He kind of thought God was going to resurrect Isaac, but he knew God had a plan, so he did it by faith. By verse 20, by faith, Isaac blessed Jacob. Verse 22, by faith, Joseph, when he died, made mention of. By faith, verse 23, Moses, verse 24, by faith. And it goes always through. By faith, they forsook Egypt, verse 27. Through faith, verse 28, he kept the Passover. By faith, they passed through the Red Sea. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell down. By faith, the harlot Rahab perished not with them that believed not. So all of these people in this chapter, their faith caused them to do something. You got to think about this. Faith is an action where it says, okay, I have faith in God. That's good. Well, your faith is going to cause you to do something, maybe to tell somebody else, to share your faith, to do something. It's not going. Faith is not dead. James says that. If you have faith but it doesn't do anything, it's dead. Faith without works is dead. Okay, turn over. I said this is going to be the last one. It's chapter 2, verse 17. Let's back up. To verse 14. What doth it profit, my brethren, though a man say he have faith and have not works? What are you talking about, a man? He says, I've got faith, but I don't have works. Can faith save him? In other words, can that type of faith, a faith that has no works, can that type of faith save him? Absolutely not. Verse 17, even so, faith, if it hath not works, is dead, being alone. And then in verse, if you go all the way, you can read this later. So it says, verse 26, for the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without works is dead also. You can't have one. You can't just have faith and no works. You're not saved by your works, but your works your faith produces works. There may be a hint of doubt, and there usually is, because we live in this carnal body, because we live in this body that don't know what to trust or who to trust or what to fear, and we have these fears and no, is it going to turn out right for me and everything? But faith acts upon it. When Savannah was a little girl, and she probably don't remember this, a real little girl, just a little baby, and I would sit her on the table, stand her up on a table and tell her to jump and Daddy's going to catch her. And she was afraid to jump because she think maybe Daddy won't catch me. But it was really not faith until she left that table and trusted me to catch her. You know what I'm saying? As long as she stood on the table and wouldn't leave the table, that's not faith. But even though she thought Daddy may drop me, she trusted me by faith, and she acted upon it when she left the table. When she left the safety of the table and took the leap, took the step, and Daddy called her, now my faith is made whole. My faith is now. So our faith, when we see Jesus face to face, will be complete. But until then, we live by faith, and we don't know the outcome, but our faith produces works, actions, an action. It's an action word. You don't get anything else tonight. Faith is an action word. It's what happened to the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Remember what they said. You can throw us into that furnace if you want to, King, and our God's going to save us. And if he chooses not to, it's okay. But we're trusting him by faith. And he delivered them. Miraculous thing that he did. It's awesome. Okay, I hope you got something tonight. Tomorrow, or next Sunday night, we'll look at this video with, I can't think of the guy's name, Super Guy. We'll be sharing with you next week, okay? All right, let's pray. Father God, we love you. Thank you for our time that we've spent tonight studying in the book of Daniel through the agents of Babylon. And it's good to know, Lord, these characters, because some of them will show up again in the Revelation. And as we get further along, Daniel's going to talk about, he's already predicted the future through, or he hasn't, he's through you and through the image, the dream that you give to Nebuchadnezzar, which was very unusual. You didn't give it to your prophets, you give it to a wicked man, and had Daniel interpret it, or you give the interpretation to Daniel, so that he could show it to Nebuchadnezzar. And we know that most of it has already come true, and still there's some parts of that statue, the feet, and then the stone that was cut without hands out of the mountain, which is you, Lord Jesus, and will crush the feet of the 10 toes, which represents 10 kingdoms that are working together during the tribulation time. And we already see this. I just saw today how the 3 of them have already come together, which is a most unusual thing. There was mentioned Russia, and I believe it was Turkey and Greece that have come together. I don't believe it's Greece, I think it's another country, but Persia that has come together in an alliance. So as they're bringing this alliance together, we know it's in prediction of your word of what's going to happen during these last times. So help us, Lord, to trust you by faith, and that our faith would act upon what we believe. Guide and direct us this day, Father, and help us to honor you in everything that we say and do. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you for joining us tonight. Did anybody ever join us?
Meron po.
Huh? What? Is it my mommy?
It doesn't show po.
Does it say? Okay, thank you for joining us tonight. Whoever joined us, God bless you. I hope you were blessed. See you next Sunday.